Okay, I've got lots of emails and texts already coming in, Grady, but let me just ask you, first of all, regarding Florida and lockdown. How's things going? Where are you at? And what is your take on it?
Currently, Florida's in very good shape. We have a Republican governor, a reasonably Republican state. And so we've basically gone back to practically fully open. Unfortunately, because of the rioters, the criminals that are coming out at night, we are currently under a curfew from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. But that is strictly a very temporary thing based on this criminal activity at night. As far as the virus is concerned, we're almost back to normal.
Okay, so you're much further ahead than we are. Absolutely.
Far, far further ahead.
Absolutely.
So with regards to the viruses, how long do you think they've been around?
They've been around 6,000 years. When God created all biological life, and viruses are technically not biologically alive, but we think of them as being alive, he created all things in 6 days. Now, the viruses themselves, we can't be emphatic, but they were created on day 5 or day 6, along with all the other creatures, because they are a creature.
So would they have affected mankind, or not so much at that time at all, because they weren't contaminated with the meat, eating the meats and things like that, or mixing with animals? Was that probably a reason why it didn't catch on, probably till after the flood?
Again, let us take a biblical and a scientific look at this issue. Viruses are not inherently bad. Viruses do have benefits. Viruses can be beneficial to us. Indeed, viruses are put in nature by God to control things like bacteria from getting out of control. People don't realize this, but when you go down to the ocean, and let's just say you take a cup of water, even a teaspoon, you will have millions of viruses in that teaspoon. And they are there to actually stop the single-celled creatures from getting out of control and reproducing beyond what the environment in the local area could support, which is what happens when, for instance, you have an algae bloom and it kills the fish. Well, there's actually viruses in seawater to control the single-celled creatures in the seawater from killing the fish in the water. I mean, these are control mechanisms, things that we call in science feedback loops, to control that one thing controls another from getting out of control, which controls another from getting out of control. And viruses do have many, many useful purposes. And in medicine, we are using viruses every single day. We are actually using viruses to deliver medications.
Interesting. So do you think that mankind actually wasn't suffering from them like we are today because perhaps our immune system was a lot stronger, etc., and we were nearer to perfection?
Again, when God creates Adam and Eve, they are perfect, including a perfect immune system, a perfect digestive system. They had a perfect mind. They had pre-programmed information beyond what we can even think about today. So everything was perfect, and that includes the viruses. That includes the bacteria. They had useful, created purposes. But because of human sin in the garden, this causes a start of decay. And that decay continues to increase like a snowball going downhill in all creatures.
So in that case, are we to expect even more of these sort of viruses and pandemics as we get to the close of the age before Christ comes back?
We can expect more viruses, more bacteria through mutations. We can expect that things will, here and there, become extinct because things are getting, as I call it, smaller, slower, and dumber over time. And that is from what's called genetic entropy. And this is what's causing these mutations that cause things to get worse. And what had good beneficial purposes may no longer have them in certain strains.
And I suppose the herd instinct really should have been the one that we should have all gone for, perhaps earlier rather than later, in order to protect the whole of mankind for the future.
It's not herd instinct, herd immunity.
Herd immunity, yes, sorry.
8 or 9 weeks ago, 8 or 9 weeks ago, I was with you.
Yeah.
And this was early on in this, before it peaked. And I was asked, what would you do? And I said, I like the Swedish plan, and I still do.
Mm-hmm.
The Swedish plan was, you do exactly what the Bible says you ought to do. You protect the weak and the vulnerable. Yes. You build a fence around them.
Yeah.
The Bible says you isolate the sick, you don't isolate the healthy.
Yep.
But what the liberal politicians have done is exactly, and you can always trust them to do 180 degrees the wrong thing, because they have an evolutionary mindset. And they're using this for strictly political reasons. It has nothing to do with medicine. The young, we know if you're below 60, you're likely to have minimal effects. If you're below 40, you almost guaranteed to have minimal effects. We have lost almost no children to this virus. We have lost a few. But people forget. People die every day. Children die every day from something.
Well,
we literally have a couple of people a second dying around the world from something.
Well, Al from London is asking a question regarding the virus. And he says, what does Dr. Grady think of the puzzling cases of non-symptomatic spread of coronavirus? Is it akin to other pathogens or not?
Well, it can be a pathogen, of course. But the fact of the matter is, when we start taking a look at the testing that's being done, we're doing more and more testing here, you're doing more and more testing there. We're finding that millions and millions of people have the antibodies for this. Some of them had slight cases. Somebody will say, oh yeah, I remember back in January, I wasn't feeling so good. They probably had 19. But the fact of the matter is, when we take a look at the numbers, the number of people that are dying is now down in the tenths of 1%. We are losing more people from the regular annual flu strains, of which we have the immune shots, which are only good for about 6 months. But we have the annual flu shots, and yet we're still losing more people to flu than we are to 19.
Melvin says the government each day say a further X amount of people have died with the virus, not of the virus. So they were vulnerable people who had already had it via the flu jab, says Melvin. Not quite sure there about that, Melvin, but anyway.
Don't confuse the flu immune shots with COVID-19, because they cannot be one causing the other. The fact of the matter is that they're cooking the books too. It has been openly stated here, and I believe also there, that if you die with the antibodies for COVID-19 in your system, you're declared to be a COVID-19 death, when in fact it had nothing to do with the reason you died. I mean, as I pointed out, today in the United States, you could die from an infected hangnail, and if you had COVID antibodies in your body at the time, they would say you died from 19. They're cooking the books. They are doubling the death rate at least by false numbers, false counts. And this has been admitted to by the people that are advising the president. Dr. Fauci, Dr. Birx admitted on TV, I saw it myself, that they were cooking the books here. So the number of deaths is exaggerated.
And also,
well, it goes back to the deep throat thing, follow the money.
Yeah, I even read last week of two particular families that were absolutely furious that their loved ones, one had actually died of a heart attack, but he went into hospital with having had a heart attack, and he died a couple of days later, but he actually did catch COVID-19 whilst he was in hospital, and so therefore the cause of death was COVID-19, not heart attack, and something else similar as well, and families absolutely up in arms about it. So I suppose it's something they need to get to the bottom of.